The voice still echoed in Clara Holt's head as she laced up her boots that morning. "You're not built for this kind of work, soldier." It hadn't been said to her directly, not in so many words, but she had heard variations of it her entire life. In foster homes, in classrooms, and now in the Army. At 24, Clara was shorter and slighter than most in her unit. Where others moved with the broad-shouldered confidence of seasoned athletes, she had the wiry build of someone who relied more on endurance than brute force. Her brown hair was tied into a neat bun, her uniform pressed to perfection, but those things didn't change the fact that she was the kind of soldier others overlooked. That was fine by her. Blending in had been her survival strategy, for as long as she could remember. Fort Campbell was just waking up under the weight of another humid Kentucky morning. The smell of freshly cut grass drifted from the parade field, mixing with the sharp tang of diesel from the motor pool. Early light broke through a thin veil of clouds, casting a hazy gold over the neat rows of barracks. Clara adjusted her ACU top and stepped out into the thick air, heading toward the company's physical training formation. She walked at a steady pace, boots hitting the pavement in a rhythm that matched the faint thrum of generators somewhere nearby. This was her first duty station after military police school, 6 months in the 2nd Brigade Combat Team. In that time, she had built a reputation for being dependable but unremarkable. She followed orders, maintained her gear, and kept to herself when the workday ended. Her room was always spotless, her equipment always inspection-ready. She was the kind of soldier you could trust to be in formation on time, but not the one anyone expected to lead from the front. She preferred it that way. As she neared the gathering soldiers, the chatter of the formation reached her ears. Weekend plans, complaints about upcoming field exercises, the kind of easy banter that came from people who had been through deployments and long nights together. Clara listened without joining in, her eyes scanning the ground in front of her. Experience had taught her that attention could be a double-edged sword. In her footlocker, beneath neatly folded uniforms and carefully arranged gear, lay the only physical connection she had to her father. A faded Ranger Regiment patch embroidered with the snarl of a warhound. She had stitched it into the inside of her left cargo pocket months ago, not for anyone else to see, but as a private reminder that she was connected to something bigger than herself. She had never met Captain Ethan Holt. He'd been killed in Afghanistan when she was only 3 years old. Her mother had died in a car accident when Clara was 7, leaving her to navigate the revolving door of foster homes. The only trace of her father that reached her was a small cardboard box the Army had sent home, a single photograph of him in full combat gear, a Purple Heart, and that worn, wore-out patch. She had carried that box through 16 years of moving, 6 foster homes, 4 high schools, 2 community colleges. It was never about patriotism or chasing some inherited dream. She had joined the military because it offered something she'd never had: structure, purpose, and the chance to build something that was hers alone. She still remembered sitting in the recruiter's office when he told her plainly that being a woman in the Army, especially in a physically demanding role, came with extra challenges. She had nodded without hesitation. Her life had already been one long series of uphill climbs. What was one more? During military police training, she had learned things about herself that surprised her. Her small frame, often seen as a disadvantage, made her faster in tight spaces. Her years of keeping her head down had sharpened her ability to notice details others missed. But these were quiet strengths, the kind that didn't win applause during a formation run or a squad competition. The morning air buzzed with restless energy as the company lined up. Clara took her place at the edge of the 3rd row. She kept her gaze forward, her breathing steady. To her right, a group of soldiers laughed at some private joke. Ahead, Master Sergeant Rivas stood with his hands behind his back, scanning the formation with the hawk-eyed focus of a man who missed nothing. Clara glanced once toward the rising sun, letting the light warm her face for a fleeting second before snapping her attention back. She had learned to take comfort in small moments, the weight of her boots grounding her, the crisp fold of her uniform, the steady hum of a base coming to life. She didn't need to be noticed. She just needed to keep moving forward. Rivas began calling the company to order, his voice cutting through the chatter. The murmurs died instantly. Clara felt the familiar shift in the air, the mental click as soldiers prepared to move as one. She thought about the patch in her pocket, She rarely let herself dwell on it, but today, for reasons she couldn't name, it was on her mind more than usual. The warhound wasn't just a piece of fabric. It was proof that her father had been part of something exceptional, something earned through grueling tests that broke many before they passed. She didn't know if she'd ever reach that kind of standard, but carrying it with her felt like a quiet promise. A promise to try. Master Sergeant Rivas outlined the day's training plan, a run followed by competitive drills. Clara kept her face blank, though her stomach tightened. She knew what competitive usually meant, moments where weaker links were exposed, where the easy camaraderie of formation gave way to the sharp edge of competition. For most soldiers, it was a chance to prove themselves. For Clara, it was a test of whether she could keep her head down while under the kind of scrutiny that never seemed to fade. The morning heat pressed down harder now, making the air feel heavier. Clara flexed her fingers once, feeling the rough seam inside her pocket brush against her skin, the place where the warhound patch lay hidden. No one in this formation knew her father's name. No one knew that the man who had worn that patch had died pulling wounded soldiers to safety. And that was how Clara had wanted it. Some legacies were too heavy to put on display. But as Rivas's voice carried across the field and the soldiers began to shift toward their starting positions, she had the strange, unsettled feeling that the secret she had guarded so carefully might not stay hidden forever. The company spread out across the field, boots crunching on the damp grass. A thin fog still clung to the edges of the training area, curling low along the ground like it was reluctant to leave. Clara took her position with her squad, adjusting the strap of her hydration pack, while the rest of the soldiers loosened up for the run. Master Sergeant Rivas stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Today isn't just about endurance," he announced, his voice sharp enough to cut through the morning haze. "It's about working together. You'll be split into 4-person teams. Every team will complete a rotation of warrior tasks and battle drills. Fastest overall time wins." There was a ripple of murmurs across the formation. Clara's stomach sank. She knew from experience that team competitions had a way of shining an unforgiving spotlight on whoever the group decided was the weak link. Rivas started calling out names. Clara caught hers paired with 3 others she didn't know well: Private Torres, Specialist Vega, and Corporal Hensley. Torres, a tall, broad-shouldered infantryman, was the kind of soldier who spoke with the easy confidence of someone used to being heard. Vega was quiet but efficient, and Hensley had the lean build of a long-distance runner. The moment Clara joined them, Torres gave her a once-over that wasn't exactly subtle. "Guess we'll be carrying some extra weight today," he muttered to Vega, not bothering to lower his voice. Clara's jaw tightened. She didn't respond, but she felt the familiar prickle of heat climb her neck. Comments like that didn't surprise her anymore. They slid off her like rain on oiled canvas. Or at least, she told herself they did. The first event was a 3-mile run. Teams didn't have to stay in formation, but they had to cross the finish line together. Hensley took the lead, setting a pace that was just shy of a sprint. Clara kept up, her breath steady, eyes fixed on the ground ahead. She'd learned long ago not to waste energy reacting to every jab or glance. Her goal was simple: keep going, one step at a time. Halfway through, Torres started to push harder, glancing over his shoulder at Clara like he expected her to fall back. She didn't. When the finish line came into view, the 4 of them crossed at the same time, lungs burning, sweat already soaking their uniforms. No one said a word as they moved to the next station. Ammunition can carries, 40 pounds in each hand, 50 yards down and back. It was less about distance and more about control, grip strength, and refusing to drop them before the end. Torres grabbed his cans and launched forward, like it was a sprint. Hensley followed, then Vega. Clara picked hers up, the weight biting into her fingers instantly. She kept her steps even, using her legs more than her back, refusing to let the strain show. By the time they rotated to the weapons maintenance station, the unspoken dynamic was already in place. Torres taking charge, Hensley quietly competing for the fastest time, Vega staying out of the friction, and Clara keeping her head down. It was the 4th event that changed everything. Casualty evacuation. A 180-pound training dummy lay sprawled on the uneven ground, flak vest strapped to its chest, helmet askew. The goal: Carry it over the rough terrain to a designated medical point while keeping simulated first aid procedures in place. In short, it was a brutal test of both teamwork and raw power. Torres grabbed the dummy under the arms, grunting as he hauled it upright. "Hensley, get the legs. Vega, you're on gear. Holt," he smirked, "try not to get in the way." Clara ignored him, stepping in to help stabilize the dummy's torso. They moved forward in fits and starts, the weight shifting awkwardly between them. The ground was soft from recent rain, boots sinking just enough to make every step harder. They were slow, painfully slow. Other teams were already halfway through their course when Torres lost his grip and the dummy lurched sideways, forcing Clara to adjust quickly to keep it from hitting the ground. "What's the hold up?" Torres barked, as if it wasn't his own fumble that had cost him time. "Your grip," Clara replied flatly, keeping her eyes forward. She wasn't looking for a fight, but she wasn't going to pretend she hadn't noticed. Torres muttered something under his breath, but didn't push it. They reached the halfway point, breathing hard, their coordination fraying under the strain. Clara's shoulders screamed with every step. That's when she saw them, Master Sergeant Rivas and another figure she recognized instantly, though she'd never met him in person. Colonel Whitaker. The colonel was here on one of his monthly rounds, inspecting training and watching soldiers in action. He had that kind of presence that could stop a conversation mid-sentence, tall, sharp-eyed, the kind of man whose uniform looked like it had never seen a wrinkle in its life. Torres saw him too, and for reasons Clara couldn't fathom, he decided this was the moment to explain away their poor showing. "We're doing what we can, Sergeant," he called out toward Rivas, his voice carrying over the field. "But some people just aren't built for this kind of thing. Maybe we need to rethink the mixed team setup." His meaning was obvious, and loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. A few heads turned. Clara kept moving, jaw clenched, her grip tightening on the dummy's vest. She could feel the eyes on her, the silent judgment hanging in the air like humidity. The colonel's gaze swept over them, cool and assessing. Clara focused on her footing, refusing to meet his eyes. Her pulse thudded in her ears. They reached the next checkpoint, the dummy still upright, barely. Clara's arms trembled, but she didn't loosen her hold. She had been here before, in one form or another, on playgrounds where she was the last picked, in classrooms where no one expected her to keep up, in foster homes where she learned not to need anyone's approval. It always came down to the same thing: prove them wrong, or let them be right. And she wasn't ready to let Torres be right. The weight of the dummy seemed to double the moment they started the uphill stretch. Every few feet, the ground pitched and dipped, forcing the team to shuffle and readjust. Mud clung to their boots, sucking at each step as if the earth itself wanted to hold them back. Clara shifted her grip, feeling the strap of the dummy's vest dig into her palm. The plastic body was dead weight, no give, no help, just mass that fought every attempt to move it forward. Torres barked out orders like he was leading an actual combat mission, his tone sharp, clipped, impatient. "Left, lift higher. Vega, keep that bag steady. Holt, get under the arm." Clara bit back a reply. The only thing worse than arguing mid-task was proving him right about her being a liability. Her breathing stayed controlled, short exhales through her nose, but the burn in her arms had turned into a deep ache that settled in her shoulders and spine. They stumbled on a patch of loose gravel, the dummy tilting awkwardly. Torres swore, yanking at the vest to straighten it. Hensley tightened his hold on the legs, but his boots slid out from under him. Clara braced, taking more of the load without thinking, her knees bending to absorb the drop. "Pick it up, Holt." Torres snapped. Her teeth clenched so hard her jaw ached, but she lifted. The strain sent a sharp pulse through her back. The moment they steadied, she caught movement out of the corner of her eye. Other teams, already jogging back from their runs, glancing over at the spectacle. She could read it in their faces, the mix of amusement and relief that it wasn't their team fumbling under scrutiny. Master Sergeant Rivas and Colonel Whitaker had stopped a few yards ahead, their hands behind their backs, watching. Whitaker's face was unreadable, not cold, not warm, just an expression honed by years of seeing soldiers succeed or crumble under pressure. Torres clearly wanted to explain himself. "Sir, we're—" "Keep moving," Rivas cut in, not raising his voice but making it impossible to argue. The uphill climb leveled out into a patch of churned dirt that might as well have been quicksand. Clara's boot sank halfway to the ankle before she yanked it free, the mud sucking at the heel. They took slow, dragging steps, the dummy swaying between them. Her forearm screamed for relief, but she found her rhythm. Small, deliberate steps, the weight balanced between her and Hensley. She focused on details. The way the morning sun caught on the damp fabric of the dummy's helmet, the faint metallic clink of Vega's gear, the steady crunch of Rivas's boots somewhere behind them. Then Torres shifted again, forcing the dummy higher on his side. The movement made the vest strap pull hard against Clara's arm, nearly jerking her grip loose. "Watch it," she said sharply. "Then keep up." Torres shot back. It was more than just rivalry. There was something in his tone that carried the assumption that she would always be behind, that her limits were fixed and obvious. They hit the next incline, and the team's breathing turned ragged. Vega's pace faltered, and Hensley grunted with effort. Clara kept her eyes locked on the ground ahead, the stubborn pulse in her chest pushing her onward. The checkpoint marker appeared, a battered orange cone standing crooked in the dirt. Relief flared in her, but it was short-lived. The final stretch was uneven terrain littered with jagged rocks and small ditches, the kind that could twist an ankle in a heartbeat. They trudged forward, every muscle trembling now. Clara's grip was slippery with sweat, but she refused to loosen it. In the back of her mind, an old memory rose, the kind she usually kept buried. She was 9 years old again, trying to carry 2 overloaded grocery bags up 3 flights of stairs in a foster home that didn't feel like hers. No one came to help. She'd made it to the top with aching hands and a pounding heart, not because she wanted praise, but because she had decided failure was an option. That same grit burned now. The dummy tipped again, and instinct took over. Clara ducked under its weight, shifting her stance so it balanced more evenly between her and Hensley. The sudden stability made them move faster, each step carrying them closer to the cone. By the time they reached it, Clara's breath came in sharp bursts, her muscles on the edge of giving out. They set the dummy down carefully. Regulation was clear about treating it as a live casualty. Torres leaned forward, hands on his knees, and muttered, "Could have been faster if—" "Save it," Hensley cut in, his voice calm but edged. Clara stayed silent, flexing her fingers to work out the stiffness. Out of the corner of her vision, she saw Colonel Whitaker watching her specifically now, not the group as a whole. His gaze was precise, as if weighing something. Rivas stepped up to review their performance, but Whitaker didn't move on immediately. Clara felt his eyes on her even as she knelt to check the dummy straps. She reached across, her sleeve tugging upward with emotion, the edge of her left cargo pocket bunching slightly. A faint brush of fabric against her fingertips reminded her of what was hidden inside, the worn patch, its threads frayed from years of being carried, its design etched into her memory. She'd forgotten it was there in the rush of the exercise, but the thought of it made her movements a fraction more careful. Whitaker's eyes seemed to narrow almost imperceptibly. Clara straightened, tucking her arm close to her side without drawing attention. The rotation ended, and Rivas signaled for them to move on to the next drill. Clara fell in step with her team, the patch pressing lightly against her leg with each stride, a silent weight she carried not just in fabric, but in memory. She didn't know it yet, but that small shift of her sleeve had been enough to set something in motion. The next station was weapons maintenance under time pressure. Normally, it was one of Clara's stronger areas, a chance to work with precision rather than brute force. But today, something was different. The air felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm, and she could feel it pressing in on her as they approached the bench stacked with rifles and parts. Colonel Whitaker hadn't moved on. He stood just beyond the edge of the training lane, arms folded, eyes following their team. Master Sergeant Rivas stayed close, saying little. Clara knew this wasn't routine oversight anymore. Torres dove into the task first, hands moving fast but sloppy, muttering under his breath about making up time. Vega worked steadily beside him. Clara crouched at the far end, focused on her assigned weapon. Her fingers moved automatically, release pin, slide assembly, separate components, but she could still feel Whitaker's gaze like a physical weight. She reached to adjust the sling, her elbow lifting just enough for the fabric of her cargo pocket to bunch again. This time, The corner of the hidden patch peeked out more clearly, the jagged shape of a snarling warhound, its once bright thread dulled with age. Whitaker's eyes locked onto it. It was subtle, no sharp intake of breath, no sudden movement, just the kind of stillness that meant a decision had been made in his mind. "Hold up a second," he said. The clatter of metal on the table faded as everyone looked up. Even Torres froze mid-motion. Rivas glanced over, sensing the shift. Whitaker stepped forward, his boots crunching over the gravel. "Private Holt," he said, his tone calm but carrying authority that silenced the nearby chatter. "That patch, may I see it?" Clara's hand instinctively moved to cover the pocket. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She hadn't shown it to anyone since sewing it there, hadn't planned to. "It's personal, sir," she said quietly. "I'm sure it is," Whitaker replied, his gaze steady. "But I believe I recognize it." There was no way to refuse without making it worse. Slowly, Clara reached into her pocket and pulled the patch free. It lay flat in her palm, the fabric worn soft, the edges frayed. The warhound's eyes still held their fierce glare, even after years of wear. Whitaker took a long look at it before speaking again. 75th Ranger Regiment. Warhound Company. I haven't seen one of these in a long time. His voice carried easily over the small crowd that had begun to gather, curiosity drawing them closer. Torres shifted awkwardly, clearly trying to figure out why this mattered. Whitaker's next words cut through the morning air. "That wouldn't happen to have belonged to Captain Ethan Holt, would it?" Clara's throat tightened. "Yes, sir. He was my father." The colonel's expression softened, though his voice stayed firm. "Your father was one of the best soldiers I ever served with. Afghanistan, early '01. He pulled 3 wounded men out of an ambush under heavy fire. Saved my life that day." The silence that followed was complete. Even the background noise of other drills seemed to fade. "I remember hearing the call over the radio," Whitaker went on. "When we got back, I saw the reports. He didn't just earn that patch. He earned a Silver Star and the respect of every ranger who served alongside him." He paused, looking directly at Clara. "If you're half the soldier he was, then this unit is very fortunate to have you." Clara felt the heat in her face, but it wasn't embarrassment this time. It was something heavier, deeper, a mix of pride and the ache of loss. Torres's mouth opened, then shut again. For once, he had nothing to say. Vega gave Clara the briefest nod, a small acknowledgment that carried more weight than words. Rivas glanced at Whitaker, then at Clara, something unreadable in his expression. Maybe approval, maybe reassessment. Whitaker handed the patch back to her carefully, as though it were more than just a scrap of cloth. "Carry it with pride, Private," he said. "Your father's name is remembered here." She slid it back into her pocket, her fingers lingering on the worn threads. The small crowd began to disperse, but the air hadn't returned to normal. She could feel it, the way eyes lingered on her now, not with doubt, but with something else. Respect? Maybe. Curiosity? Definitely. Torres avoided looking at her as they moved to the next drill. For once, he wasn't walking a step ahead, trying to lead. Clara didn't need the colonel's words to validate her, but they landed all the same. Her father's story wasn't just a page in some military archive. It lived in the memories of people like Whitaker, and now, in the way her peers looked at her. The rest of the rotation moved in a blur. She completed her tasks with the same quiet focus as before, but something in her posture had shifted. Her shoulders straighter, her movement steadier. The patch pressed against her leg with every step, no longer just a private token, but a reminder of what she carried forward. When the training concluded, Whitaker addressed the company. "Every soldier here brings something unique to the table. Some of you carry more than just your gear. Remember that the next time you think you know what someone is capable of." The words weren't directed at anyone in particular, but Clara saw Torres glance sideways. As the soldiers were dismissed, Whitaker stopped briefly beside Clara. "Holt," he said, lowering his voice. "If you ever want to hear more about your father, the real stories, not just what's on paper, my door is open." "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Whitaker gave a brief nod before walking away, Rivas falling into step beside him. Clara watched them go. The the weight in her pocket somehow lighter and heavier at the same time. She had spent her life trying not to be noticed. But now, whether she wanted it or not, she had been seen. Dismissal from morning training usually brought a release of tension. Soldiers scattering toward showers, the DFAC, or quick errands before the workday kicked in. Today, though, Clara felt the air around her shift in subtle ways as they moved off the field. It wasn't loud or obvious. No one suddenly broke into applause or called out her name. Instead, it was in the way conversations faltered when she passed, in the sidelong glances that lingered just a little longer, in the faint nods from soldiers who normally wouldn't have noticed her at all. Private Vega caught up with her as they headed toward the barracks. "Your dad was that Captain Holt?" he asked quietly, like he didn't want to make it a spectacle. Clara gave a small nod. "Yeah, I guess so. Guess so." Vega almost smiled. From what the colonel said, he was a legend. Clara shrugged. "I didn't know him. Everything I have fits in a shoebox." Vega didn't push for more. He just nodded again, the kind of acknowledgment that said he understood more than he was letting on. Torres trailed a few steps behind. For once, there was no running commentary, no muttered digs. Clara didn't look back, but she could feel the absence of his usual swagger. Maybe he was rethinking his assumptions. Maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter as much to her as she thought it would. By the time she reached her barracks room, the sweat had dried into stiff patches on her uniform. She shut the door, the quiet wrapping around her like a familiar blanket. Crossing to her footlocker, she lifted the lid and began pulling out her neatly folded ACUs. At the very bottom, tucked under a stack of T-shirts, sat the box. The cardboard edges were worn, the tape yellowed with age. She pulled it out, sitting on the edge of her bed as she lifted the lid. The photograph was on top, her father in full combat gear, rifle slung across his chest, a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The Purple Heart lay beside it, the ribbon still crisp despite the years. And next to that, the patch, the one she'd been carrying every day, the one Whitaker had recognized. She set it on her palm, tracing the edges with her thumb. The colonel's words replayed in her head. "If you're half the soldier he was, this unit is lucky to have you." It was tempting to let those words define her, to suddenly see herself through the lens of someone else's achievements. But Clara knew better. Her father's legacy was his own. She couldn't live in it like a shadow. She'd have to build something alongside it, piece by piece. She thought about the way she had carried that dummy uphill, about the stubbornness that had kept her moving when her muscles begged her to stop. That had been hers, not his. Her fight, her grit. The knock on her door startled her. She tucked the patch back into her pocket before opening it. Torres stood there, hands shoved in his pockets. He looked awkward, which was something she hadn't seen from him before. "Hey," he started, glancing past her like he wasn't sure if he should be here. "About earlier. I didn't know." Clara tilted her head. "Didn't know what?" "Who your dad was," he admitted. "Didn't mean to." He stopped himself, then tried again. "Guess I was wrong about you." She studied him for a beat, then said, "You were wrong about more than just me." Torres cracked a small, self-conscious grin. "Yeah, fair enough." He gave a short nod before turning to leave. When the door shut, Clara exhaled slowly. That was as close to an apology as she was ever likely to get from him. And maybe, for now, that was enough. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine duties, cleaning weapons, logging reports, a quick lunch. But everywhere she went, the patch in her pocket seemed to press against her leg like a heartbeat. At evening chow, Master Sergeant Rivas stopped by her table. "Colonel Whitaker wasn't blowing smoke," he said without preamble. "Your old man was the real deal. Men like that, they change the people around them. Sounds like he changed the colonel." Clara met his gaze. "I never wanted to make it about him," she said. Rivas nodded. "It's not. It's about what you do with it. Some soldiers spend their whole careers trying to live up to someone else's name. Others use it as a foundation and build their own. You've got a choice." She didn't answer right away, but his words stayed with her long after he walked away. Later that night, when the barracks had gone quiet and the lights in the hallway cast a pale strip under her door, Clara lay on her back staring at the ceiling. Her muscles ached from the day's drills, but the fatigue felt clean, earned. She thought about the times she had been underestimated, not just today, but over years of being shuffled from place to place, of proving herself in small, unseen ways. The foster homes where she learned to adapt. The classrooms where she taught herself not to need validation. The training yards where she refused to quit, even when quitting would have been easier. It wasn't that the colonel's words didn't matter. They did. But what mattered more was that, before he ever knew her name, before anyone saw the patch, she had already decided to keep moving forward. Her father had been a soldier who carried others to safety under fire. She was a soldier learning to carry herself through the grind, day after day. Different battles, same principle. She reached into her pocket, feeling the familiar shape of the warhound patch between her fingers. Tomorrow, the comments might return. The skepticism might creep back in. The army wasn't a place where one good moment erased all doubt. But she would wake up, put on her boots, and step back into formation. And maybe, just maybe, she'd stand a little taller.